Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Go Live. My name is Dave Solberg, the managing editor of the RV Repair Club, and it's July already. It's flying by like crazy. Just got back from the Winnebago Grand National Rally this afternoon. I went there yesterday and today, and we swapped out a Traveler Winegard antenna, satellite antenna that had direct TV, and we put Dish Network on it. So we had a couple little glitches that we had to walk through, and they actually did a pretty good job this year of getting people in. I was surprised with the gas prices. They got almost 600 units in, which is very good for the rally that is in very hot weather in Iowa. And so they were pretty glad that they were able to do that, especially with the last couple of years not being able to do one. But anyway, welcome to our show. We've got some questions already, and there's a couple questions that were posted from last month that we didn't get to. They came in afterwards, but I really wanted to touch base on it because they talk about a couple other questions that are in here. Starts that off. So the first one I see here is that so I got RV Newbie was a guest, and I don't know if he's in this week or not, but he makes a comment that he's got 5 kHW batteries, 4 100 amp hour 12 volt. I was told the soft start would void my warranty and extended warranty. And what he's talking about is there's a couple of basically they will soften the ramp up of an air conditioner when it starts up. Some of these air conditioners will spike into 32 amps before settling back down on the startup. And normally when you're on a 30 amp service, you can't run 2 of these at the same time, because the ramp up goes a little bit too long. And so we actually did a video, and it's going to be posted here pretty soon on the Soft Start RV, which is a condenser. I don't know the technical aspect behind it, but it's just basically a box, and it will limit that startup to about 14 amps from the testings that we saw. So you don't get that big thumping when it starts and that real loud noise when it starts up. And so it's just a nice soft start of it. And you don't cut any wires. All you have to do is crimp on a couple different ends, like a spade connector and a female spade on one side. There's 6 wires. And so you're literally just taking a spade connector off the compressor up on the roof and just realigning it so it goes through this in a soft startup. And so it does not void the warranty. I've talked with Coleman. I've talked with Dometic. Right now, Keystone is using a very similar product on theirs as standard in that. So, a lot of times, I'm not sure who told you that it would void the warranty on it, but some of the components out there that you start cutting wires and you start rewiring that whole system in the air conditioning, I would say, yeah, some of that earlier stuff was not quite as proven, but this is definitely a proven component, and it is something that we've put on there, and it was just amazing what it has done. In fact, the owner that we put this on just texted me this weekend. There was the first chance they got to take it out, and we did a lot of stuff. We put lithium batteries in it and all kinds of things. But he texted me a shot of them sitting outside and relaxing with thumbs up, and said the air conditioners are fantastic. Both of them running on a 30 amp service, and those batteries are wonderful. So that is something. Go to our website. You go in, and right now we have a $30 discount on that Soft Start RV. So it's something that I definitely would recommend it. And it does not void the warranty. Very easy to put in. So the next question then we have, so the same RV Newbie, 3 kW inverter, batteries and solar are from Go Power, and I've configured them to the lithium settings. And one of the things, and the reason I brought this up is that I definitely, I really want to impress on people the importance of doing their homework when it comes to lithium batteries. Now, I've got the Expion 360 back here, and I really like that battery because they use top-of-the-line cells. There's a lot of cheap cells. There's a lot of stuff made overseas that people are just slapping their label on it. They call it peel and stick is the term in the industry for taking somebody's cheap battery and putting that in. And the thing you got to remember, in an RV, there's a lot of stuff that's available in the residential world that is a lot cheaper, like solar panels and batteries and certain things like that. But you start putting those into an RV application, and they're not going to last. You know, the thing with those, they're designed basically to sit in a house, in a storage, in solar applications or commercial applications where they're protected in an environment that is heated most of the time. So you start taking batteries and you put them in where you've got heat changes. You got really hot in the summertime when it's not being used, and you get 100 degrees outside. It can get 120, 130 inside those compartments. And then you let it go down below freezing and you run it down the road, vibration. So you really need something that, first of all, do your homework, ask to see what's inside those batteries. You want top of the line cells. You want those cells that are mechanically connected. And that's the big thing, because most of these cells are going to be soldered together, and a solder just does not last in an RV. And you want a battery management system that will make sure that every cell is getting recharged to the same point, and that if it does go below freezing, that's a big thing, that you cannot charge a lithium battery if it goes below freezing. Otherwise, it'll ruin the battery. So you have to do one of two things: either shut off the battery, or you have a heat pad, or put them in an area that is heated so they don't get below there. Then the next thing to look at is, what type of converter do you have? And when we put it in, this guy had a WFCO, we call it WFCO, and you will either have a regular all-in-one converter or this type here, and they're just going to run 13.8, this one's 13.6. Winnebago has 13.8 until your battery reaches 12.6, and then it'll go down to 13.2, which is kind of a maintenance charge. If you have that with a lithium battery, you're only charging about 60%, because lithium wants 14.6. So you need to take a look at that charger. We worked with Progressive Dynamics and put one of their lithium charger batteries in it. If you have a multi-stage charger, then you're going to get 16 volts, which again will ruin the battery unless it has a multi-stage or a battery management system. But you can't just dump a lithium battery into something. Even if you have the inverters, you got to check the converter or the charging system. You got to check what your solar panels have for maybe a control charger there. And then also the distance. If you're some of these trailers, you start putting a lithium battery and you want to put it somewhere completely different of where you had your tongue batteries, that longer distance is going to require heavier cabling to get there. Otherwise, you're going to get voltage drop. So you can't just dump in lithium batteries. So one last one. And the last one from last month is Mario has a 2003 Sightseer Winnebago. Is there a way to keep the water hose connected to the RV so that water can permanently, without having to fill up the tank when it gets empty? So I'm thinking he's probably looking at the wintertime. And the reason I brought this one up, we got winter coming here pretty quick. And well, hopefully not really quick, but there is a product out in the market that I've come across called Pilot. And it is a heated water fill. So it's good for fresh water. You can hook it up to your city fill. It has a little heat line. You do have to plug it in, but it will keep that from freezing. So you can use it year round, and you don't have to keep refilling a freshwater tank that's inside that gets heated. Okay, so now we're to July 21st, and Dave Buckman says, does the generator have to be running on my 2000 Winnebago Journey 36G diesel for the AC to run while I'm driving, or will the AC run off the diesel? The AC will not run off the diesel. The only thing, so you've got your diesel probably on a Freightliner chassis. About a quarter of the way up, you have a fuel fill, or fuel fill for the generator, so you don't run your tank out of fuel, but it will run the generator while you're running down the road. But that air conditioner only runs off of 120 volt power, so it goes right down to the distribution center, and so there's no way of running that rough air conditioner without running your diesel. Now, having said that, I've learned to never say never, or never say always in the RV industry. One of the things that we have been seeing is some of the manufacturers have been putting in lithium batteries and then putting in the soft start. Now, Keystone is one, they call it the Solar Flex, I think it is, or Flex Solar. And they start off standard on their units, 200, 400, 600 watt solar panels, depending on the size. And of course, they're fifth wheels. But then they also have a larger inverter and the Battle-Born batteries. And so they're doing 200 or 400 amp hours. And they are literally running the roof air conditioner off the house batteries through the inverter by 120. So it's still 120. But that is the only way I know of that you would be able to drive down the road and run your roof airs in your Winnebago is if you had a soft start, first of all, in the generators, and you would have a battery bank large enough with an inverter so you could charge that. And while you're going down the road, you're getting a charge from your engine to your house battery. So it would kind of keep them topped off. So that's something I might suggest looking at if you don't want to run your generator. Rick says, I have 3 water connections on my 2021 North Trail Ultralight by Heartland. 1 on the side that's labeled freshwater connection and 2 in the back labeled city water connections. What exactly do the 2 in the rear fill or rinse? So I would imagine that the one on the side, when it says freshwater connection, that if it doesn't say city water, then usually what that is called a gravity feed. So you go to a rest stop area and you dump your tanks and you want to fill, and they have that big accordion hose that's potable water, and you can stick that in a gravity fill, and that's how you fill your freshwater tank. If it says city water fill, then the city water fill bypasses your freshwater tank and your pump and provides pressurized water from a city source. So you're at a campground, you're at your house, whatever, you hook up to the faucet, and that will run pressurized water through everything inside. And a lot of people like to do that because they don't want to carry a full tank of water. It's 8.2 or 3 pounds per gallon. So, you know, you could have almost 800 pounds of water just sloshing around in there, and then getting stale and so forth. And usually the pressure from a city fill area is higher than your water pump. Now, the water pumps have gotten better, so it's not quite as bad. I would imagine then at the back side of it, a lot of times what people will do is, or manufacturers will do, is they'll put a black water flush valve right next to it. And I've seen that on a lot of fifth wheels where they've got one fill right here and another fill right underneath it, and they put city fill or city connection, and they don't put anything here, or the label has come off. And so what the black water flush, and I've also had this happen too, where people have said, I hook up to my city water, I turn it on, and my black water tank fills up. You know, what kind of a bad connection do I have? Well, I think they've misread what each one of those valves is, and they hook that up. And that black water flush valve is simply a valve on the side of the black water tank that is going to spin and put pressurized water from your city connection against the sidewalls, and especially the probes, trying to clean all that stuff off. And so what I would recommend to do is, you know, if you can't tell exactly which one it's doing, you know, hook up to one of them and then try a faucet. You know, if you don't get pressurized water through your system with that faucet, then it's either going into the freshwater tank or it's going into the black water fill. And you should be able to hear it, you know, in either one of those, or you should see your black water fill up or your freshwater tank fill up. So that's pretty much what I'm thinking those are going to be. So Don says, I heard the battery making a bubbling noise on my 2015 Adventure. It is plugged into 110, so I disconnected the battery. Does it charge all the time? Are you that you're plugged into 110? And then he came back and said, should I always disconnect the batteries when plugged in? And you shouldn't. So here's how the system works. You've got either 2 6-volt batteries hooked in series, or a 12, or maybe 2 12s hooked in series. They, at full charge, they should be 12.6 volts. And so once you drain that down to a certain point, approximately 50%, your converter is going to kick in. And this happens to be a WIFCO converter. And I'm going to turn this on. I got it plugged in to what's a typical campground source there. This would be either in a single application like this, where you have all your circuit breakers, your fuses, and this is your converter over on this side, or you would have it right here. And I think we got it running now, and I'm going to show you what it does. So we put it on 12 volts here. We've got 0. We'll bring it over here. Now this is going to be kind of hard to tell, but what happens is when your batteries drop down and they need to be charged, this is going to go at 13.6 or 13.8 if you've got a Winnebago with the Magnum. They've specified theirs a little higher. If you've got a multi-stage charger, it's going to go into the 14 to 16 volt range because it wants to break up that sulfation. Now, this one, you'll notice, I'm just going to put the probes in to the two areas here. 13.64 volts. And it's doing that because it does not sense a battery hooked to this. So, you know, it'd be the same as if my battery has charged down or is discharged low enough that, hey, I need to pop that up. Now, when your battery hits 12.6, then this is going to drop down to 13.2. And at 13.2, your battery will not accept a charge. So it will start to use by itself, basically, and it will not bring this down till the battery gets to a certain point. Then this will kick up into 13.6 again, like we just saw here. And when it's at 13.6, it's going to boil a lead acid battery. So that's the gurgling you hear in there. And you might have, like I say, a multi-stage charger, which has a bulk stage. That's 16. That's really going to boil it, which is good in the fact that it's going to break up the sulfation. But it means you get more gassing off of it. You're going to have to add more water, check that maintenance a lot more often. So a lot of manufacturers just put this in, then 2 to 3 years, your batteries start to sulfate, and nobody's happy with those. Now, one of the things that I have seen happen, so you don't want to disconnect your batteries. That's you know, you do that, and this thing's going to run all the time, and eventually you'll wear this converter out because you need 12-volt batteries. You know, even when you're hooked up to 120-volt source, you need 12-volt to run your lights and all this other stuff, and that goes through the battery through the converter. If you have your batteries at 12.6 and your converter is always running at 13.8 or 14 something or 16, then evidently your converter is not sensing that your batteries are coming back, or the batteries are no good, which could happen also, and it's always sensing that they're low. You know, the Thor that we worked on a couple weeks ago had 2 interstate batteries in it that were absolutely horrible, and this thing was running 100% of the time because those things would not hold a charge, and eventually this is going to burn out because it's not designed to run at that high capacity all the time. So we got this out of this one because we went with the lithium batteries with the progressive dynamics, because that's going to do 14.6, you know, that they want. So take a multimeter, check your batteries when it's plugged in, you know, check them when they're unplugged. Just what's the condition? Are they 12.6? If I plug my converter in, my Shoreline, and all of a sudden it jumps to 13.8, then probably my converter is not sensing and dropping down like it's supposed to. And that's going to boil those batteries and just keep boiling and boiling and boiling. And eventually you'll need new batteries. So I'm going to turn that off. I don't want to live jolt on me. Okay. So again, don't disconnect your batteries when you're plugged in. Make sure you understand how to manage them properly. So Eric has a 2013 Jayco Greyhawk with a Coleman Mach 15 heat pump unit. Every time the unit cycles off when in the cool setting, I hear a fan stop turning. Then for about 5 to 10 seconds, I can hear what sounds like water drops sizzling on a hot surface. A sizzling sound for several seconds every time that unit cycles off. Just annoying and puzzling more than anything. I don't notice any other irregularities with the units. Any thoughts? So probably what's happening is you're getting condensation, and that's pretty common with it's always there with air conditioners because it's drawing in warm, moist air through your air return in your ceiling. It's pulling it through the evaporator coil in the front, and that's flashing with a coolant, and it's pulling out moisture and it's pulling out heat. And so that moisture is supposed to drop down into the pan and then dissipate off to the side and runs off the side and usually goes to your entrance door. And so then that coolant makes its way back outside, you know, so that cooler air, then you drop it about 16 degrees. The cooler air gets dumped into your rig, either by ducted work or right at the unit itself. And so when you're shutting it off, it's got a whole bunch of condensation still on those coils. And what I would imagine is happening is that it's dropping onto something that's, because that coolant gets really hot. You know, they call it coolant, but it's 300, 400 degrees. And so what you might want to take a look at is, you know, you can do a little bit of modification with those rigs. The first thing I would do is I would take the interior air return down, the shroud, and just take a look at it, because I've seen a couple of companies that have made an aftermarket airflow helper or diverter, because that air comes in and it just simply gushes right down into the pan, and then it's supposed to hit the duct. So there's a lot of movement and stuff in there, and it's not a real efficient way to do it. So there's this blockage piece. I have seen some service centers, and it's something we're going to work on, have gone in and actually made a little diverter. So they put on the bottom of it, out of styrofoam, this little pyramid, and then they put a top pyramid in it and seal everything in there so that nothing's leaking, and that literally forces the air out to that ductwork. And by sealing everything in there, you are sealing up leaks. You know, any place you have a seam that air can get out of, you are losing efficiency. And the more efficiency you lose, the more hot air you can get from other places, and it's moist. The more condensation you're getting, the less it's going to get out of there. So I would start with that. Seal up anything in there that you can find. You know, go to a home improvement store and get some of the furnace tape. It's not duct tape, but it's more of a reflective HVAC tape. Aluminum tape, and seal up everything in there. Don't let any cracks or stuff get stuff out. And then maybe even go up on the top, take off the cover of the top of your unit, and then you'll see in the front where the evaporator coil's at, probably has a shroud, metal shroud over the top of that. Take that off and just run it, and then stop. And where is that dripping coming to? So somewhere you're getting condensation dripping on something really, really hot, and it may be that you want to put some of that heat foil or tape in a place where instead of hitting the hot metal, it hits something that is, you know, not quite as skillet pan or whatever in it. So there are some things you can do for efficiency on those. So Jason, no, wait, I meant AOK4U2NV. When stored for short periods, 1 to 3 weeks without shore power, should we disconnect house batteries? When we disconnect house batteries, the system display panel no longer receives power, so we can't see the Magnum AGs. I'm not sure what that means. On a 2022 Newmar Country Star, does that mean the eggs won't work? Okay, I'm not sure what the eggs are, but you know, if you're going to store your unit for 1 to 3 weeks without shore power, you typically don't need to disconnect the batteries. You know, they are going to drain down a little bit, but if you go in and make sure you disconnect everything out of that rig that'll draw anything out of it, you're going to have some from the LP leak detector. You might want to just find the fuse for that, pull that out. But you know, 1 to 3 weeks is not that bad. One of the things that I have seen people do if they're going to be outside storing it, just get one of those small little portable solar chargers that just do a maintenance charge in it. That'll help top that off a little bit without having to have a real elaborate system anywhere. But if you don't have it, I wouldn't worry about 1 to 3 weeks in that. And you know, if you start disconnecting the batteries, yeah, like I say, then any presets you have inside that, and I didn't see what Newmar Country Star. Okay, so you know, you've got chassis batteries and you've got house batteries in those things, and the chassis batteries, you start unplugging those, and then you just wiped out all the settings for your transmission and your ECU, your computer, and all that stuff. And so that's not a good thing to do. But I would try those things, and I wouldn't worry too much about it for a week to 3 weeks. Unless you got something that's draining it pretty heavy, then I'd go in and find out what that is and try to get that taken care of. So Jason now says he just bought a 94 Dutch Star. Don't know where to find any info and would be grateful for any help and point in the right direction. And he's contacted Newmar, who says they have no data at all to the age of that RV. And one of the things that's a little frustrating about Newmar is, Newmar was an outstanding company for many, many years, and Winnebago bought them, and they kind of let them do their own thing, but there's been a lot of change in who's in there, and some of the old guard is not there anymore. So I don't necessarily believe they don't have any documentation on that stuff, because they were very good at it. I do believe they say they don't, but it all depends on who you're talking to. And one of the things I guess I would highly recommend is if you can post this on the social media pages, on our Facebook stuff. We've got a whole bunch of technicians that have got a lot of years of experience in this and a lot of connections to places that might be able to find some information. And the other thing you can do is that I don't know how many out there have a owner's manual that's worth a darn, because most of them that I've seen are so generic that they refer you to every other OEM, we call it. So you don't get any information about the refrigerator. You have to get the manual from the refrigerator company, and hopefully that's still in there. So the thing I guess I would recommend to do is start searching. First of all, get the make and the model and the year of your refrigerator, your air conditioning, your furnace. All that stuff is fairly generic, and I'm still able to find a lot of the old owner's manuals for those that actually give you some good information on operation and maintenance. And so that's kind of the direction that I would go to try to get that stuff. And then, I'm assuming that 94, you might have had a slide room in it, and Newmar was pretty proprietary on their slide mechanism. They used a rack and pinion one. But I would believe that if you can identify the style of it, that we could find something that's pretty close on the Lippert. Lippert owns almost everything in slides anymore except HWH, but you should be able to find it's a rack and pinion system that they use. So it is getting harder to find some of the documentation on older units in most cases. However, Winnebago, if you go on their website, you can go clear back into the 80s. You find wiring diagrams, 3D schematics, parts breakouts. It is one of the most phenomenal sites for information I've ever seen, but that's not the norm. Up on a roof most of the day today, so it's a little warm. Will Clark, are you familiar with the simple electronic component called a thermistor that protects components from large inrush current like air conditioners and microwaves? They are evidently just soldered in line with the hot line feed and drastically reduce startup amperage, which can greatly help breaker tripping as well as protect the component from that startup inrush surge. I have some size by Amatherm for both the roof air conditioner and the microwave, and they are only a couple bucks each. I'm not familiar with the thermistor version of it. That term's always been used for the temperature sensor in the refrigerator. I know there's a lot of condensers out there, a lot of electronics that are kind of geared into that, and a lot of the the HVAC and the electronic gurus have played with those things for years and years and years, and I would not trust anything that has a couple bucks and has to be soldered in line. I still go back to the soft start RV and the testing that they've done and the track record that they have, and how easy it is to put in. And I have seen that personally work. It is a lot more expensive. It's not a couple bucks, but I still, I have never really witnessed a huge jump or spike with microwaves. You know, that's something that if you have a surge protector that you use on a normal basis outside, it will kind of it'll show that amp draw. And you know, I've done a couple on microwaves, and it hasn't been that much. But the air conditioners, yes. And I guess I would steer away from more of the homemade stuff at this point, and go with something that is easy to install, that it has a warranty behind it, and you know, has a good track record. But it's not to say that you can't do it. I know Mike Sokol is one of those guys out there that, you know, he can wire up just about anything, and he's probably developed something similar to this. But I'll do a little bit of research with Mike, but I don't. I've never heard of the thermistor used in that application. Mike Gallagher, I have a 2019 Forest River 3-foot trailer. He says that's a tiny home. So it could be 30 foot or whatever. How often should you grease the bearings? I only use one weekend a month. Well, most of your bearing manufacturers, you've got Lippert, you have Dexter, there's a couple of others out there. They recommend once a year or 15,000 miles. And, you know, to me, I think once a year is just a good rule of thumb. But the other thing that I do, I ran a company for the last 10 years that we had 3 trucks and trailers out in the road, and every one of those put at least 100,000 miles on. And the first year that I took this company over, we were having axle problems and bearing problems and all kinds of stuff out on the road, and it's very expensive to fix those on the side of the road. So I had the guys start, you know, and that was a question we had: how often should you repack the bearings? We tried Bearing Buddies, and all that does is throw grease all over the place, and tried a bunch of other stuff. So what I did with my guys is I had them get one of these infrared thermometers, and this one must have the batteries out. But what that does is it just does a little infrared bead, and once a day, I tell people in my driving classes and my towing classes that you can kind of tell what's happening with those bearings by the temperature that's going in there. So you hit the hub of that bearing of that wheel once a day while you're driving down the road, and you've stopped somewhere for gas or whatever, and you see what the temperature of that is. And if it's, you know, ambient temperature is 80 degrees outside, it's not uncommon for those hubs and bearings to get about, you know, 90, 95, even 100. And you'll start seeing a pattern, you know, and sometimes you'll see one side is hotter than the other. That may be because the sun is over on that side, or that side is heavier. You know, you put all the stuff on the same side as you got the generator and all these other things out there. But when you start to see that temperature spike and it gets up to 120, 130, 140, then you know those bearings are starting to get dry and they're getting hot. And that is a great indicator to tell you, you know what, it's time to change the bearings. It might be more than once a year, you know, because you don't know what's happening inside that packing. I also do it with the brakes, because you're going to have supplemental brakes, electric brakes on that. When they start to spike, they're either set too high, or my brakes are starting to you know, get down to the point where it's metal on metal and it's giving me more heat. And then I also do the tire, because I can see temperature on it. So I get this at Harbor Freight. I think it was $19.95. Great tool to have just to understand what is happening inside that packing. So Bill G says, what are the best type of batteries for a fifth wheeler with solar panels? 200 watts, questions on the solar panels. 12 volt car type or 2 6-volt? Well, you do not want to do car type batteries. You know, the two different batteries are, you've got a automotive battery that's designed for cold cranking amps. It's going to have a real high amperage to turn that starter, turn that engine, get it started, and it's going to stay charged with the alternator in there. And that should only be used in the automobile application. You put that into a house battery situation where it's going to drain down, and then this is going to kick in, and it's going to drain down and kick in about 7 or 8 times of that battery's not going to take it. It's not going to be any good anymore. So you know, you only want the deep cycle batteries. The difference between 12 and 6, and so, you know, 12 volt doesn't just necessarily mean it's engine battery. 12 volt means it's going to be 12.6 volts fully charged. And the 6 volt batteries that are common in in golf carts and stuff like that, have been used in RVs for many, many years, but you have to have two of them. So you're going to hook them up positive to negative. That means in series. And what that does is it gives you a 12-volt bank. So it's about the same as this 12-volt deep cycle that you can buy here, and you only have to have one. It has to be deep cycle again. The advantage of the 12-volt is I can use just one. So if I don't do a lot of boondocking, I don't have to buy two batteries. There's less maintenance in a 12-volt. When we were at Winnebago, we kind of researched the two of them, and in the 6-volt battery, it will last longer, meaning years longer, if it is taken care of properly, if it is multi-stage charged, if you maintain it, put more water in it. And some people were saying, you know what, I'm not going to boondock that much. I want to put one or two batteries in here and be able to do an overnight at a campground, or not a campground, a boondocking place, like a rest area or something like that. I'm not going to do a lot of dry camping. So, the advantage, like I say, of a 6-volt is with more plates and more acid, it can cycle more times. So, a 6-volt battery in series could last you 5 to 7 years. They typically don't, because nobody is multi-stage charging them and they're not taking care of them. So it really depends on how you are camping. And check out some of our videos. We've gone through a series of those of what is the best battery for you. If I'm going to be doing a lot of camping, and another option is AGM batteries, absorbed glass mat. They don't sulfate as bad, so I can still do those in 6-volt or 12-volt applications. Or do I go lithium? Lithium's going to cost you at least $1,000 or more per battery, and then you've got to go through the charger, like we talked about, and all the other stuff that's involved with it. And if you don't dry camp, that's a lot of money for something you're never going to use. So in my opinion, the best battery has to be identified by how you go out. If you're not going to dry camp much, I would stay with a 12-volt battery, but get a good battery. That's the key in any situation. These discount places that have batteries, you find an 8995 battery, the only advantage of it is 8995. It is not going to last. It's going to have inferior plates inside. The welds are going to be bad. There's so many things that those batteries are not going to do, and those people are building them just to rotate stock, just to keep it going, and you go in and go, wow, and they're going to say, well, you're going to pay for the name of that one. And it's like, well, you're not paying for the name. You're paying for a better product that's going to last a lot longer. And if you do the education, then you have to decide. It's just like anything else. There are price points, and you can get cheap stuff, or you can buy more expensive stuff. It'll last longer and do what you want it to do. So William came back and said the thermistors seem to be an extremely cheap option versus the soft start, and seem to do the same thing. So again, I'm not familiar with the thermistors. One of the things I will do is I will have Mike Sokol take a look at those, because if anybody is up to date on those, I think that would be Mike. I think maybe part of it's kind of like anything in electronics. If you have the expertise and the capability to go in and solder and cut wires and put things together, you can a lot of times find components that will do the same thing. And but the average handyman, and it may be the point where if I can buy this box and I can take these 6 wires and clip it up, majority of the people would probably go with that. So again, I'll do a little more research on it, and if you see anything, join us next month. Hopefully I'll have something for Mike on that, and we'll dig into it a little deeper. So Michael Morris says, I have a 2005 Fleetwood Fiesta. The generator runs on gas. Is there any way to measure exactly how much fuel the generator consumes per hour? There is none that I know of. I know there, and more than likely, 2005 you got an Onan, and it probably it's a Fiesta, so either 3,000 or 4,200. Either way, it doesn't matter. Onan has done a series of fuel consumption tests, and they have the printed data on all that stuff. But that's running in a completely isolated situation in a perfect world when it was brand new. And I don't know that you ever get that type of performance out on the road. About the only way that I know of that you could literally test the fuel consumption in something like that is to somehow have a flow gauge on the fuel line coming into that. And I have never seen one on a generator other than in testing applications. I've gone through Onan and Kohler and Generac. At one point we used those, and I've gone through those facilities many times and watched their testing procedures. And they were doing the voltage and the spikes and the noise, dB levels, and fuel consumption. So they had a little meter set up, and within an hour time frame it used X amount of fuel. But I think you could probably get a general idea of that just by taking a look at the manual, find out the make and the model. I'm sure it's an Onan, but what model is it? And it also depends, if I remember correctly, on there's times where the generator is going to be a little more under load, and your RPMs and so forth, and it will work a little harder when the roof airs are running. So that will all depend on it. Steve says, and one more thing I did not see yet. Katie is helping me on this, and normally we have a download. So Katie, if you could, I'm looking through, say, Tom asked Charlie. So I have not seen a link on the download, so I'm not sure if we have one of those tonight or not, but I'm just going to bring up, and Katie should be watching, and she should post the link for you so that we can get that going. All right, what type of batteries? Fiesta season. Steve says, when using gas on my camper fridge, it shuts off after trying to light. So there's several things. I guess the first thing I would recommend is go in and take a look at the videos we have on the refrigerator. And evidently you're using an absorption refrigerator, whether it's a Dometic or a Norcold. And so the way the system works is that your eyebrow board, when you set it to whatever setting, cold setting you want to it, there's a thermistor inside there, and that is your temperature sensor. So it tells the eyebrow board that, oh, nope, we're not at 34 degrees. That's where I want to be because I'm on the highest, the coldest setting in this. So it will send a signal down to the gas valve or the module board. And the module board, the first thing it will do is it will open up the pilot line and try to light the pilot of that. And then you have a thermocoupler above that. And so what it's doing is that, first of all, it says, okay, open the gas valve and spark. And it sparks a certain number of times. And if that thermocoupler does not feel flame after a certain amount of time, it will shut the system off because it's saying no flame, nothing's working, but I don't want that gas valve open and dumping gas into the inside of this rig. So the first thing I would do is I would make sure, is this doing this on shoreline power? If your batteries are sulfated and it doesn't have enough oomph to get this thing going, then it's going to not give you quite the spark that you want. It probably won't start. So the first thing I do is plug the unit in. Make sure this thing's giving me 13.2 at least, or 13.6. The next thing then is to go outside and take the cover off the back side of your refrigerator. And there you will see the gas line comes in. There's the gas valve. There's a little spark igniter. And so is it sparking? It opens the gas valve. So, okay, I need cold. Open the gas valve. Gas comes through the burner tube assembly. And then you've got a small little igniter. It's a piezo. It's just like in a grill, that little ceramic thing with the probe, and it's going to go, and it's going to try to spark. So do I have LP coming through? Do I have the spark trying to light it? Do I have the spark going to the burner assembly, because if I have a crack in that porcelain covering on it, the spark is going to follow that crack down. It's called thermal chasing, I believe it is. I think I have to think about that. Anyway, so that might be not be getting to it. So check all those things, you know, on step by step. Do I see this coming through? Do I see the spark trying to go in there? And, you know, I may not have enough fuel coming through it. So the next thing I would do is I would take and get yourself a little thing like this. This happens to be a just a blowout tube. All I do with this, I hook it up to a air compressor. This one's broken now. I'm gonna have to fix it. But in the back, you take and blow out that burner assembly. You'll see the tube that's coming through. Some of them have slots in it. You'll then see the little spark igniter. Put some safety glasses on, because there'll be a lot of soot if you haven't done this for a while. There is a spider that likes the smell of propane, and will go in and spin a web that blocks that flow. Soot can do the same thing in there. So just blow that all out really good. Make sure you're getting a gas flow, your LP flowing into that tube and mixing with the air, and that spark is going to the right place. And then see if it actually lights. You'll have a little cover over that, and there's a little sight hole that you can open up in there. But I take that whole cover off and just clean that everything out of there, and then watch what it's doing. Where is that spark going? Does it try to light? If it lights and it's jumping around, then that tells me either that burner assembly, or LP supply tube is dirty and blocking the flow, or my LP regulator is not giving me a good flow of LP coming in here. And but if it does light and it sits there for a long time, and then or for a period of time and shuts down, it might be the thermocoupler is bad on that unit. So those are the steps to take to see if that's working for you. I'm gonna Okay, so Katie did grab your pre-trip checklist, download for your next trip at gorv.com/A4256/. So just go look in our where you've been posting the questions and scroll down there, and she did put that up for us. Okay, Bill says, I have a Forest River Wildwood 2005 fifth wheel, replaced the Suburban water heater last year. It worked as it should, but a month later, when started, we heard a banging sound coming from it and smelt something that may have been plastic melting. We turned it off, turned off the unit, but now upon restart, no hot water. Can the parts individually be replaced, or replace the whole unit? You should be able to replace the parts, and I happen to have, you said Suburban, I think, let's just, I have no budget for a grip, as you can see. So here is basically, what that component is. I'm going to turn this around. This one happens to be with a motor aid that runs antifreeze for a motorhome through this and heats this up while you're traveling down. But here's your cover plate. You might be able to. You probably got a heat element. If that heat element shorted out, it could have burnt the plastic. I've seen that happen on this backside. And you should be able to get a new heat element and a new control board for it. There's just a series of electronics on that. There's really nothing in the front that could pop and melt other than up in here. And you should be able to take this apart fairly easily. It might be tougher to get to the back. I've seen some absolutely horrible places they've been mounted to, but you definitely should be able to get to the front. So I'd take that front cover off first, look at your control module up in that upper right-hand corner and see if that's where your plastic is melting and coming from. And Probably the other thing that I have seen happen is if you started it up and you said you replaced it with the SW6 gallon, so you have an electric, and that's pretty much, I think this is a 10, and it's an Atwood. But if you start up an electric water heater without water inside that unit, it will get too hot, and it will pretty much burn out the heating element, and it could, that whole area gets hot. I've seen even some of them where it will puncture the tank. But if you don't get a leak out of it, then that's probably not happening. So take that off and see if you can find that upper component in the front. You should be able to get that, or that back component in the backside. Automatic generator. So, okay, what was the question? I'm gonna go back and see here. Okay, when stored okay, they say when stored, should we disconnect the house batteries? And they came back and said automatic generator system. So I'm not sure what automatic generator system means from the person that was storing 1 to 3 weeks with the, AGS, automatic generator system. Okay, I'm sorry. 1001, so 3 seconds in the brain. So her AGS, they're saying up here. So I wouldn't, again, 1 to 3 weeks. I don't think I'd disconnect that battery. It's really not going to do anything for your automatic generator system, because that is just sensing when the batteries get to a point, or excuse me, not the batteries, when the, if your shoreline power, most of them anyway, if your shoreline power goes out while you're camping, it will automatically turn your generator on so your refrigerator doesn't, ruin the food and everything inside. Okay. So Steve comes back and says, on our Class A, we have a Baystar Newmar 2016. When driving down the highway, fans, radio, dash turns off for about 5 minutes, then comes back on while still driving. Okay, that is something, and I would say your Baystar Newmar probably has a Ford chassis, 2016. So the Ford F53 chassis, something, you've got some kind of a relay on there that is overheating. It's getting weak, and it's overheating and shutting those components off. And that one's hard to find. I guess one of the things that I would do is contact your selling dealer, find out what Ford station or Ford dealership they've made arrangements with, and see if that, I haven't gotten too far into those, because normally Ford is very proprietary. You take it to a Ford dealership, so we don't work on a lot of the chassis related items, and that's something that, even though your highway fans and some of the stuff might be installed by Newmar, it all comes from the 12-volt system of the engine and that fuse panel. So Tom asks, why does my Swift hot water keep tripping out the RCD? And that is another tough one, that Swift hot water system. And I am not familiar with the Swift hot water system, so I'm sorry, but let's do this. Why don't we post that on our social media network? I will make a note to do a little bit of research on that. There's, over the years, in fact, the challenge with the last couple of years was with no shows and nobody going anywhere and traveling, and then the industry exploding. It's been hard to get information. It's been hard to keep up with some of the changes and the things that have been introduced into the market here by Lippert and by Truma and by all these other companies. And, before it was kind of easy just to be able to go to the California RV show or a couple others. And since a lot of those have been canceled, it's been very, very challenging. So let's do a little more research on that. I do apologize. I cannot help you with that. Santos asks, is it okay to leave your motorhome plugged in while storing? And yeah, and that's one of the things we were talking about beforehand. You leave it while plugged in. Just make sure you turn If you got a battery disconnect switch, turn that off. You still will get a charge into the battery. One of the things that you want to do is just make sure you keep those batteries from draining down and sulfating. So if you can keep it plugged in, that's good. Just don't run, the refrigerators and the air conditioners and all that other stuff. Just unplug, or not unplug. Just go into your breaker. You should have on a distribution center like this. What I typically do is I just go in here, and this is going to be my main breaker. It's 230 amp circuits. Just shut that off, make sure everything is off, and then I know nothing is pulling any amperage from in there. So the only thing that should be working is this converter. And we've got, where are we at here? 3 minutes. Mark asks, I have a 91 Itasca. Wow, that one is an oldie but a goodie. And the fridge has a slide switch for electric, off, and gas. The switch is stiff and does not engage the electric power. Question is that the switch connected to a relay contactor, or can I just replace the switch to return it to its functional state? And the 95, you would have a Norcold with that, because that's what Winnebago was using at that time. I took out many of those, and so you've got the switch on the gas. And one of the things I think I would recommend is to get some of the electrical contact spray that dissipates pretty quickly, because a lot of times what happens with those units is you get a lot of dust blowing in those when the doors open and the windows open and stuff like that. And then you get a little bit of condensation, so there could be some rust, there could be some dust, there could be a little bit of a buildup in there of something. I would first try spraying that really good with that electrical contact cleaner. It's just a red. I think CRC makes some. I've done that on several components in the past that are pretty nasty looking, and that can clean up a lot of stuff, a lot of those contact points, and make it slide easier. I wouldn't do any of the lubricating stuff in there, because some of that stuff lingers in, and you could actually create an arc across that stuff. But if you unplug the unit, I would disconnect the negative battery cable and then go in and spray that really good and see if it'll help. Otherwise, I think you can get just the switch. You should be able to take off what we call the eyebrow board of that thing. That's the control panel, and be able to just look at that switch by itself. Now, if you can find it, that's another question. Maybe, and Winnebago couldn't help you with that. There's a Winnebago parts, but that would be a Norcold, and they don't carry that. About the best thing is get the make, model, and serial number of that rig. Start doing some Google searching on parts. There are some people out there with those units. In fact, you know what? We have what is it? It's a 92 Sun Cruiser with that exact same refrigerator that we pulled out and put in a new one because the door was jammed. And so what I can do is it's kind of up in the storage area, so maybe I can pull that apart and see if we can identify. But find the make, the model of the unit, of the refrigerator, and then let's start researching parts availability for that. And I think a switch has got to be fairly generic. So I would even contact Norcold and see if you can find somebody. The problem with Norcold right now is with a lot of people in the last 5 or 6 years, that the old guard that would have known about that unit, most of them are not there anymore. I had a couple really good, Kevin Stover and a couple guys that they were my go-tos at Norcold, and they gave it up when COVID hit, and they were at retirement age, which some people say I should too. So anyway, we'll do a little more research on that. All right, we got time for one more. It's 5:01, but we started just a little bit late. I was yakking. Gary asked, what do you think about mini split for RV? I have a 35-foot 2000 Dolphin, and the heat pump went out. I'm thinking about putting two 1200, 110 volt unit in, one head unit in the front and the other in the rear. What do you think about doing this? seeing it's a lot cheaper than to buy another heat pump that came in the unit. And I'm not a big fan of the heat pump myself. What a heat pump does is it literally runs the AC backwards, and it pulls BTUs out of the outside air and it heats the inside. And the theory is that if you're at a campground and you have free electricity, instead of using your LP heater, you can use this air conditioner, but it only works down to about 55 degrees, and it only gives, you know, I just haven't been a big fan of that heat pump. I'm more, what I like to do is if I want to supplement a heat, I don't want to use the heater inside. I'll use one of the portable that you just hook a propane bottle to, or you know, and it draws very, very little stuff. The thing about those, it's nice because you don't need to heat the entire rig all day and all night long. You know, you heat the living room in the day, you heat the bedroom in the evenings. When it gets to that 60-degree area, just a little bit, you know, you don't have to be worried about it freezing. So, in my opinion, I would go with what you're looking at. The other thing I might look at, we've put a lot of RecPro, RECPRO air conditioners in the local campground here that several people from Winnebago just permanently camp there all the time. And they've had a lot of the Colemans that have had issues with them, and they've gone in, and the RecPro is about half the price. So that is something to look at. I just want to do one real quick. Remember to take a look at the download for the free pre-checklist. And Charlie asks, how do you determine good versus great batteries? Go on on the RV Repair Club site, take a look at some of the battery videos we had on there. We do definitely go into that. You know, you want the better connectors, and if they don't show you how their battery is made, then I would walk away. You know, the people that do a good job, do quality, do the hard connections on those things, they'll show you that because they're putting more money into it, so they need to tell you why, and that's the thing you'll find with them. So with that, I appreciate everybody coming out. We got to most of the questions. We may put the next ones up after that, and enjoy what's left of your summer. For those down you roasting in Texas, my granddaughter is in Austin, and she said it's the most miserable heat she's ever had. And I said, no, you've never walked beans back in the day. So that has got to be, or baled hay for those of you. So with that, I appreciate you coming out, and have a great rest of your summer, and join us next month. Okay.